Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Harivedikacharya Astatara Satasi Stimadis Divine Grace Easy Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Is there a reason that that camera got taller? It's up higher? Is there a reason? Can you make it a little lower? Because I like... Okay, continuing, Canto 10, Chapter 38. And this morning we're going to begin with text 26. 10:38:26. We're with Akrura, or Akrura's with Krishna now. He hasn't seen Krishna yet, but he is seeing the dust from Krishna's feet in his footprints. 26 translation reads, increasingly agitated by ecstasy, as seeing the Lord's footprints, his bodily hair standing on end because of his pure love, and his eyes filled with tears, Akrura jumped down from his chariot and began rolling about among those footprints, exclaiming, "Ah, this is the dust from my master's feet." There's no BBT purport. Here's Vishwanath commenting. Seeing those footprints with excessive tears in his eyes, Ashrunam Kala, he jumped from the chariot. He rolled a chestita in the dust of those footprints while weeping. With choked voice, he said, "Oh, what fortune to attain such rare things." Jiva Goswami's comment, he was in a state of agitation, or Brahma. So we know what the word Brahma means, right? Brahma, it means making mistakes. One of the 4 defects of conditioned souls, Brahma. This is Brahma. So the word for, in the translation, it reads, increasingly agitated, Brahma, by ecstasy. So the word ecstasy is ahlada. Ahlada. By the ecstasy, Brahma, in an agitated state of mind. So this is, Jiva Goswami is consistently been commenting about the meditations of Akrura as he's approaching Vrindavan, and he has used this language, sanchari bhavs, and this bhav and that bhav and that bhav, and this is another ecstasy. It's not one of the 33 sanchari bhavs, but it's definitely an ecstasy. What our acharyas comment on what Brahma is, it's an ecstasy that's very common in Dasya Bhakti. So it's kind of like astonishment, but it's in intense respect. So the servant towards the master, when the servant is regarding the master, then there may be some very strong, intense feelings of Brahma, intense respect, agitation of the mind, and that quickly evolves into prema for the Dasya Bhakta. So there's a stimulation. This is Rupa Goswami's teaching. There's stimulations for ecstatic love. So the marks of Krishna's feet for Akrura is stimulation for ecstatic love. Udipan is the Sanskrit word used by Rupa Goswami. It's part of the science of rasa, so we're just going a little bit more deeply. We just read the verse. He's experiencing an ecstasy, but there's a stimulation for that ecstasy. And that's dust, or the marks of Krishna's footprints that tell him there's dust from his Lord's feet here. So that's the stimulation. He's experiencing an ecstatic emotion, Brahma, intense respect. His mind is agitated and it quickly evolves into prema. And he does prema things, crying, rolling on the ground, and so forth. So he was in a state of agitation, or Brahma, in which he could not carry out necessary inquiry. Sometimes when a servant has intense respect for the master, they're speechless. No, it's not always like that. It's just, there's variety of servants towards master, emotions of the servants toward their master, but this is one of them, and this is what Akrura. He hit the flow of his thought process is checked. Thus he rolled among the footprints. The phrase "out of prema," because that's in the Sanskrit. Premna urdhva, out of pure love. Premna urdhva, his bodily hairs were standing erect. Out of prema. The phrase "out of prema," premna, should be repeated for all the phrases. Because of prema, he was agitated with joy. Because of prema, his eyes filled with tears. Because of prema, he rolled in the footprints. And what preceded that prema was sambrahma, intense respect, an ecstatic emotion. The word aho expresses the rareness of seeing those footprints. Somebody forwarded to me from the Jagannath Rath Yatra, there was a photograph of one of the pujaris carrying on his shoulder a Panchadhatu foot of Lord Jagannath. You know that Jagannath doesn't have hands and feet, but in their the Rath Yatra they provide him hands and feet. So he was carrying this large, I'm sure it was very heavy, also Panchadhatu, precious metals. And it's not just because it's precious, it's like, wow, this is fantastic. It's the lotus feet of the Lord. He's carrying the lotus feet of the Lord on his shoulder. I mean, it's not Hanuman carrying Ram and Lakshman on his shoulders up the Rishamukh mountain, or during the battle scene, Yudhakanda, he carries Ram to go fight with Ravan. But the rareness of even seeing those footprints, he's recognizing how special it is. What fortunate to attain such rare things. And he loses it. It's rolling around. Those are symptoms of ecstasy and not to be imitated. When I showed that image, I sent the image to several people. One devotee said, how fortunate is that pujari to carry the lotus foot of Jagannath. Anyway. The word iti indicates that the whole last line was what Akrura said. The whole last line of what Akrura said in the translation, BBT. Ah, that's aho. This is the dust from my master's feet. Rupa Goswami writes from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where this is now speaking what is Udipan, stimulation for ecstatic love. An example of his footprints from the 10th canto. Increasingly agitated by ecstasy at seeing the Lord's footprints, his bodily hairs standing on end because of his pure love, and his eyes filled with tears, Akrura jumped down from his chariot and began rolling about among those footprints, exclaiming, ah, This is the dust from my master's feet. Text 27. The very goal of life for all embodied beings is this ecstasy which Akrura experienced when, upon receiving Kamsa's order, he put aside. So here's a prerequisite for prema in case you want to experience prema. You have to leave aside all pride, fear, and lamentation, and absorbed himself in seeing, hearing, and describing the things that reminded him of the Lord. BBT purport reads, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that Akrura gave up fear by openly showing his love and reverence for Krishna, even though he or his family might have been punished by the angry Kamsa. That's fear. Akrura gave up his pride in being an aristocratic member of society and worshipped the cowherd residents of the simple village of Vrindavan. So fear, pride. He gave up lamenting for his housewife and family, which were in danger from King Kamsa. Giving up all these things, he rolled in the dust of the lotus feet of God. So here is Vishwanath's commentary that it just made reference to. After describing the actions of Akrura's body, words, and mind, from his starting the journey in Mathura until his entrance in Braja, the conclusion is given in this verse. As Akrura gave up all false pride on seeing the footprints and rolled on the ground, this is the goal of human life. He gave up pride, hitva, bam, such as, how can I, Akrura, minister of the king, worshipped by the king, roll in the dust of a cowherd boy? He gave up fear of Kamsa, being angry for rolling in the dust of Krishna, who is Kamsa's enemy. He gave up lamentation, shutcham, concerning destruction of his wife, children, and house by angry Kamsa. Giving up the fear can also mean giving up fear of criticism from friends. Giving up lamentation can also mean giving up the following considerations. Oh, as we are born in good families with power, respected by all, how can we roll in the dust of Vaishyas, who are low, penniless, dressed in worn cloth, disrespected by all others? The wise men, on seeing the Vaishnava with tilak and garland and marks of the Lord on his body, should roll on the dust of his feet. The phrase giving up pride, fear, and lamentation can be a reference to the ordinary man, but it is not applicable to Akrura because he didn't have those things. Hearing and remembering the glories of Hari from Narada, this tells us, before, how did he get Krishna Bhakti? From Narada. He heard about Krishna from Narada. I mean, he probably heard from others too, but he heard from Narada. Akrura had a desire to serve the Lord in Dasya Rasa. Quote, when will I serve Hari in this way, and when will I get the good fortune to see him? There should be the desire of the devotee. That's us. Jiva Goswami writes, in relating how Akrura rolled in the foot dust, Shukadev praises Akrura because of his intense bhakti. This is the goal for those who have bodies, otherwise the body is useless. The statement that after giving up pride, fear, and anxiety, this goal arises applies to Akrura as well. Akrura gave up pride, as illustrated in verse 18. Here's what it says in verse 18. The infallible, omniscient Lord will, I hope, not consider me an enemy, even though Kamsa has sent me here as his messenger. That was text 18. Though pride did not manifest, he had cause for lamentation and fear, since his friends were being persecuted by Kamsa. But in front of Krishna, who had appeared to protect his family, there was no cause for being overcome with lamentation and fear. Verse 26, that was the first for this morning. Verse 26 stated that he experienced increasing bliss on seeing the footprints. And there's also a reference. This is Canto 3, Chapter 1. It's Vidura sees Uddhava in the Vrindavan forest, and seeing Uddhava, oh, how are the residents of Vrindavan, of Dwarka? And he mentions Akrura. So this is Vidura speaking to Uddhava about Akrura. He says, how is wise, sinless Akrura surrendered to the Lord, who, losing control out of strong prema, rolled in the dusty path marked by the footprints of Krishna? Akrura could not react in this way if all sorrow had not been removed. In order to bring the chariot into Gokula. So that statement is a rasa statement. There's rasa bhasa, rasa abhasa. So sorrow wouldn't lend itself to the ecstasy that he was experiencing, so he had to have given up sorrow. But he was feeling on the way these different contemplations. Will the Lord accept me? Will he place his hand on my head? I'm a messenger of Kamsa, but yes, he will, because he's omniscient and he's very kind. So through knowledge, he countered those feelings of spiritual humility, and now it's ecstasy. In order to bring the chariot into Gokula, after rolling in the dust, he again mounted it. For it is mentioned in verse 34, coming up, that again he dismounted to bow to Krishna and Balaram. So some details are left out. He hasn't seen Krishna, just seeing footprints, and he gets off the chariot and rolls around. He had to get back on to go to where Krishna was. Then he sees Krishna and dismounts again. Sanatana Goswami writes, in relating how Akrura rolled in the foot dust, Shukadev praises Akrura because of his intense bhakti. This is the goal for those having bodies. Otherwise, the body is useless. Quote, he put aside all pride, fear, and lamentation. This is a general description. In prema, such qualities are not actually present. Dambha means falsity. Lamentation is caused by separation from things one treasures. One experiences fear because of wicked people. If these are present, he could not roll on the ground. Thus, it says he gave these up. Or, it is meant as an instruction, like for us. Giving up is recommended because of the wealth of prema. Hare, or unto Lord Hari, means of he who attracts the mind. Akrura absorbed himself in hearing, seeing, and the symbols. Linga. Symbols means the marks on his lotus feet. Linga. Remembering and chanting are also included, and also serving as a messenger, Sunday Shat. So we're going to hear about how he was hearing and chanting. Certainly he was remembering. The goal of the living entities is rolling on the earth in prema, Ian. What was his verbal service? So here it is. It is chanting such as verse 26, which reads, Akrura began rolling about among those footprints, exclaiming, "Ah, this is the dust from my master's feet." We're almost done. Linga, the symbols on his feet, can also mean the deity form. Chanting, however, is the main process since he was filled with prema. Later, he mounted the chariot to bring it to Gokula. In verse 34, it is described he then dismounted the chariot. So we'll continue with this text 27 tomorrow. It's been quite a ride, traveling with Akrura to Vrindavan. He's honored by Krishna. He's honored by Narada, great devotee. He's a very special devotee in Krishna's pastimes. And as we were discussing yesterday, a little difficult to understand, a bit of a puzzle. I mean, the big puzzle is how he was involved in the murder of Krishna's father-in-law. But there's another puzzle that is a little easier to solve. Why, when Kamsa put Vasudeva and Devaki in prison, and he put his father in prison and took over the throne, and most of the other, because this is the Yadu dynasty capital. Later, the Yadu dynasty capital, by Krishna's arrangement, was shifted to Dwarka. But prior to that, there is a historical or otherwise, long-standing relationship with Dwarka. When Krishna chose to move the Yadu clan to Dwarka, there was an already existing relationship that's described. So although Dwarka was built in the sea and for protection purposes, etc., it's an eternal abode, and there is a relationship for the Yadu dynasty to be there, because what he could have picked any place. It has historical relationship. But prior to that, prior to Dwarka, Mathura was the capital. Like Hastinapur was the capital for the ruling emperor, Mathura was the capital for the Yadu dynasty, at least this wing or division of the Yadu dynasty. But when Kamsa took over, most of them fled. They just left. Or those that remained were in constant fear. So he remained. Not only he remained, but he stayed in Kamsa's service. That's puzzling. Because Kamsa's a bad guy, so why did he stay and serve the bad guy? And the one explanation that's provided, to me, makes a lot of sense. He is a devotee. Now, at what point in time he became a devotee is not clear. Certainly, from hearing from Narada, and maybe he heard from Narada before Kamsa took over or whatever, but he heard from Narada about Krishna, and he stayed because he knew that Krishna was going to appear. The prophecy was there. The 8th child of Devaki will kill you. So he came to know that's the personality of Godhead is going to be the one that kills Kamsa. So he wanted to see. So this is now, it's being fructified. His good fortune was being instructed by Kamsa, go see Krishna, bring him here, for diabolical purposes, but his his desire was being fulfilled. It's so all this is to say it is a little puzzling. But he's on another platform. Like Vidura remained in Hastinapur, despite knowing all the intrigue of the royal family, he remained. He wasn't in the same kind of a position as minister that Akrura was, but he was wise, Akrura, and people consulted him and so forth because he is who he is. So he was doing some form of service even in a compromised situation. And it served him well because he got to bring Krishna to Mathura to kill Kamsa. And as we're hearing these narrations, even Shukadeva Goswami is feeling some displeasure that just the narration, the concept, Krishna is going to leave Vrindavan. Shukadeva doesn't like it. So he's feeling unhappy. So Akrura gets some negative energy from great personalities for doing what was Krishna's bidding, ultimately, for Krishna's pastimes purposes. Lots of mystery in the lives of pure devotees. So let's see if there's some discussion. Yeah.
Guru Maharaj, in that verse that we read today, it mentioned that Akrura overcame pride, fear, lamentation, and such. So these qualities seem to be tied to bodily designations. And does it mean that he overcame the bodily designations and reached that stage of prema? How do we understand that, Maharaj?
You can understand, according to what we just read, you can read it either way. He was already free, or he became free. And how he became free was the love for Krishna burst forth, and those things, whatever residual amounts were remaining, they're gone. On the strength of bhakti, not just like the strength of eradication of anarthas or the bodily conception of life.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Akura's enthusiasm and love for Krishna. In one of the class, you mentioned meditate upon it when during the chanting. So when I tried that, it's really it helped me on that day to do wonderful chanting. But my mind, after 2 or 3 days, it proposed me to have something else, new inspiration, or it is fading out. Is that something that I'm lacking faith, or my bhakti is just an external one? It's not coming from internal. I'm struggling like every time. My mind is looking for something. Okay, this is done now. Um, have something else.
Depending upon our stage of spiritual advancement, depending upon that, it can mean different things. It can mean, just like, for example, here with Akrura, he had different emotions, and the different emotions were moving, and the emotions were moving, and the emotions were moving. So we're not on the stage of Akrura, but there may be something that inspires you, and then something else that inspires you, and something else that inspires you. And then there may be some periods of inspiration, and then becoming weaker, or the enthusiasm diminishes, the unsteady bhakti experience. So it can be any number. It can be a number of things, and different things at different times for each one of us. So I don't think you should beat yourself up because something inspired you for some number of days and then that kind of faded. That's just part of unsteady bhakti. And in the mature stage, it's part of waves of um, spiritual emotion connected to Krishna that move the mind and the heart. So at our stage, it's most likely just unsteadiness. So just accept that's the stage that I'm in. And you can try to connect with Krishna and that, again, reconnect that, or something else or something else. The main thing is connect with Krishna somehow, or yena tena pakarnena manat krishnena veshayat. In responsive, it's just anecdotal, but during the Purushottam month, the temple president now he resigned from his service as president, Shamsundar in Houston. He's in a senior citizen phase, and he turned over the presidency to someone else. So during the Purushottam month, he was chanting minimum 64 up to 100 rounds a day, every day. And in the mornings, he was conducting a japa class for whoever wanted to join, and it became very popular. So one of the devotees in that community wrote saying, I'm really inspired. One of the methods that Shamsundar is encouraging us is chant swiftly, because it helps us to concentrate, and I'm finding I'm able to concentrate more. So I wrote back saying, fantastic, but don't think that there isn't something else that can help you concentrate. There are various tools, and the most important thing is that you make the effort to connect with Krishna. If you just rely on a tool, you're missing the point. So that's another way of saying the same thing that I said to you. That you felt inspired and uplifted, fantastic, and then don't go into this self-deprecation thing. And not that you were doing that, but there's not something wrong with you, or your bhakti is, cosmetic. It's just unsteady, a stage of unsteadiness. And the main thing is somehow or other make that connection. That's where the focus should go, somehow or other. And then different things become impetuses. So that's, in a mature stage, that's a rising of a spiritual emotion, ecstatic emotion. And at our stage, it's just, inspirations that come and go because of our unsteadiness. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So yesterday's class you were teaching about when Akrura saw the Lord's foot on the sand on Mother's earth, but it preserved it. Do we still see them preserved at this point?
I don't. Maybe there are some devotees that do, but it may have been a special circumstance. Who can say? Something else? There was a question that came at the end of yesterday's class. Do you have record of that on your phone, or got deleted, or?
So this is from Govinda Mohini Mataji. She says, this recommendation of reading this pastime again and again sounds very tempting and the desire is there, but time factor doesn't seem to favor that desire. What to do?
Do a little bit each day. Do the incremental program and spend some extra time on weekends. That's it. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.